Hey, it's me, James. Happy Monday to you all. I am filming this video on Monday, March the 3rd. We are going to be looking at the week ahead. But before we get into that, if this is your first time here, I'd like to say welcome and thank you for taking time to explore content on my channel. And if you are a returning viewer and visitor, I'd like to say welcome back and thank you for your ongoing support of the work that goes into the content for my channel. So thank you one and all. This week I am so excited to be working with the deck on the table for two reasons. Number one, we are working once again with the Mitchell Playing Card Tarot. This is the deck that I worked with last week, only that this is a new variation of the deck. So I changed the card backs, changed some of the images in the deck, and this is the reason why. Last week, or I should say, well, last week was the last week in February, but for the month of February 2025, I really took a look at my practice, and wanted to do some different things in my practice for two reasons. Number one, last month was Black History Month, and as a person of color, I really wanted to explore more of that within my practice. And second is that on February the 13th of last month was my 25th anniversary of being a card reader. The very first deck I got of cards was on February the 13th in 1999. So I wanted to have a deck kind of represent that journey. So this is like the 25th anniversary deck of being a reader. It's like a commemorative deck for me, but it's, again, a variation of the Mitchell Playing Card Tarot. And I talked about this last week, but if you're here for the first time, so this deck is a combination of playing cards with the major arcana from Tarot added into it, because I had a dream way back in the day of being in a school, a classroom, and seeing decks of cards as houses of cards on a floor, spotlighted. So I walked over and picked up the cards, and when I looked at them in my hands, I realized I had a combination of a tarot deck and a playing card deck. And so, as a result of that dream, it became the foundational deck for my practice. And going back to last month being Black History Month, I really wanted to, in a way, come back to my roots. So you'll be seeing this deck a lot in this space, because it, again, is my foundational deck as far as my practice goes as a reader, and I wanted to celebrate and honor that. So now that I've kind of talked about that, we're going to just jump right in. So we're going to do what we've been doing in this space, and that is a weekly card of 5 or a line of 5 reading. So I'm going to take the deck in hand. I'm going to shuffle the cards. And my intention for these weekly general readings is to ask the cards to provide the story or give us any insight, guidance, or advice that's going to be most helpful and beneficial as we move through and progress through the week ahead. And as I'm shuffling, I will also say that I'm very excited about looking at this week in particular, because as I said in my Kippercast video for the month of March, that this week is my birthday. So I'm celebrating my birthday on March the 7th, which is Friday. So because of that, I'm interested to see what's in this week's cards. Alright, so I'm going to stop there. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And now I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention, and they will serve as the line of 5 for the week. So I have the 5 cards here at the bottom of the screen. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick the remainder of the deck up. So I can move that to one side. Now I'm going to line the cards up in the order that they were selected. All right. And so now I'm going to read the cards from left to right. If you're new here, this is how I read a line of 5 when I'm using a deck of cards like playing cards or tarot cards even. So each card has a positional meaning. So the first card is the origin, and that basically represents the possible situation that's going to unfold for the week ahead. And then the other cards will be in alignment to this particular card. Or it could be why we're asking the question. If it was a more specific question, then this would be like, what's the undercurrent, what's really going on as to why the question that's being asked is being asked. Next position would be expectations, meaning like what would our expectations be for the week ahead. Middle card is the heart of the matter, the central issue, or the focus. Sometimes I call this the hidden influence, which would be slightly different than the first card. Next would be guidance or advice. My philosophy as a reader is that the cards are not the boss of us. They don't tell us what we need to do, should do, ought to do, but rather they offer some potentially helpful piece of guidance or advice that we could consider following or taking. Yeah. And then the last card would be the potential outcome. Again, philosophy of the reader is that I don't believe that the future is written in stone. This would be a potential or possible future in relation to the origin of the situation and possibly the guidance being offered. Okay? So let's take the cards one by one now that I've gotten that out of the way. First card here is the world. So now this is no stranger to these weekly readings. This card shows up quite a bit. And what I like about it, it has kind of just shown up in various places. One time, I'm remembering off the top of my head, it showed up here in the position of the hidden influence, the heart of the matter, or the central issue or focus. And then last week, I believe it showed up here in the position of expectations, right? So now it is in the first line. So what I love about it, it's going, using an astrological term, it's going retrograde, right? Or it's, it's kind of going back to the leading position here. So again, if we remember that our expectations were to complete things, because the world card can be a card that represents a successful completion of a chapter or cycle, then if that was the expectation, then it's showing up here as the situation. So it could represent that, once that situation has been completed, then the world can represent the start of a new journey or being at a place of a higher level or a new level of awareness as a result of completing a certain chapter, cycle, or journey through life. Yeah. So now it could also be a situation that involves a community or a group of people, because I tend to think that the world card can represent something that's worldly, something that's global, something that's universal, that kind of thing, right? So there's that to consider. So it could be an unfolding situation that involves more than one person or involves a particular group or community of people. It could also be a situation that involves people who are in a different location in the world. For instance, I'm in the United States, so this could be something that is taking place or unfolding in another part of the world, right? Because it implies something that's foreign, something that's abroad, or something that's overseas, that kind of thing, right? It could also be about career. This is a career card, so there may be situations unfolding regarding people's careers. And specifically for me, this could either be people who are graduating. If you are in school, then this could be you're nearing graduation or completion of that, and then you would be going out into the workforce or the working world, right? Taking that education and moving it into the real world, right? So there's that. Or you could be established in a particular type of work or career and you are considering retirement. This is a retirement card for me. So I usually either see it as graduation or retirement. And so here in the United States, we as a collective are experiencing people who are considering retirement or resigning from their work or having their work come to an end. I talked about that last week, and so that is still going on in some cases and in some industries, that it's still taking place. So that may be why the world keeps showing up in that regard. So there is that. And it could also be from a more metaphysical or spiritual mindset or lens, as I'm talking about that situation. It could be that, have we gotten the lesson yet? Remember now, this is about higher level of awareness. So have we gotten the lesson yet with that situation, that unfolding situation, right? So there is that as well. And that reminds me that the world, astrologically speaking, is assigned or associated with the planet Saturn. And Saturn is the taskmaster in astrology. It's the card of challenges and learning lessons within those challenges. And that's another nod to the major arcana in Tarot. Tarot, that particular aspect of Tarot, the major arcana, can be about lessons and principles, right? So what is the lesson that is being learned throughout either a group, a community, or even the world? Are we learning the lesson, right? And I'm putting that out there, not that I have the answer, but for each and every one of us who's experiencing this video to be thinking about. Are we really learning the lesson, right? Because Saturn would dictate if we don't learn the lesson, it will come back again. In astrology, we have what's called Saturn returns, yeah? So this idea, like if we're not learning the lesson, it's going to come back until we pass the test, meaning learn the lesson in the way that it was intended to be learned, yeah? Okay, so there is that. I'm looking again to see what else I need to say. Oh yeah, if you are a spiritual practitioner, then this card bears some significance for you. For me, this card can represent people who practice spiritual psychology, astrology, people who are channelers, people who delve into the Akashic records, those types of things. That's not the exhaustive list, meaning there could be other modalities and practices I'm not referring to, but those are the ones that I immediately think of with this card. So, you know, it could be like you are being asked to take a look at your practice, and there could be more of a sense of expansion with your practice, right? Meaning that you could be potentially reaching more people. And I used the example a couple of weeks ago, like for me, like especially when we were going through the pandemic. Oh, now 5 years ago. Can you imagine that? It doesn't seem like it's been that long, and it does seem like it's been that long, if you get my drift, right? So, but back then, I was only doing in-person consultations, maybe doing some phone consultations within the U.S., and then once the pandemic hit, I found myself experiencing more increase with international clientele, right? So I was doing more Zoom consults, and I still do those to this day. I only actually do my consults through Zoom because I found out during that time that I was having more international clients than local clients. So I kind of just folded the idea of seeing people locally and just converted all of that, those sessions and the way they're conducted on Zoom. So there could be that, you know, and then that would be a pun for the World Wide Web, yeah, right, reaching more people, but that would be the way to do that. So that are some of the things I'm seeing within the world card. So now let's move on to expectations. And here we have another major arcana card. Okay, so now this is interesting. So this is the Judgment card, one of my favorite major arcana cards personally, because I'm an angel person, and in the traditional image there is an angel on the card. So this card here is about decisions being made, major life choices and decisions. I call it the executive decision card, right? So this card is about using your judgment, using your discernment, using your wisdom is one of it. But it can also be about people are being expected or having the expectation of passing life's exams or tests. It's very interesting that I talked about the Saturn aspect of the world card with the idea about, you know, learning the lessons. This card, when it comes up, can be about passing life's tests. So this could be going through examinations. So maybe for the people that I talked about with the college aspect of the world card, you know, facing examinations, you know, which means that you're your coursework, your schoolwork is coming to a close, if you are about to embark on exams or examinations, right? And if you're not in school, if you're in the school of life, let's just say, then this card is asking us to examine our our life, either generally, overall, or within a particular aspect, to see if we are learning the lesson, right? And then this card specifically would say, if you didn't pass a test, if you didn't learn a lesson, it will come back up for you to re-experience, so you can decide at that moment whether or not you want to pass a test. And passing the test would mean like either thinking different things about the experience, meaning having new thoughts, new insights, new awarenesses about the situation, or taking some different types of action than you did in the previous time that the situation was experienced, right? Meaning like you get a do-over, right? You get to take the test again, right? But the way the universe works, at least in my experience, is that, you know, certain situations are recurring because the lesson involved hasn't been learned, and we get to decide whether or not we're going to learn the lesson in the way that it was intended. Yeah. So there's that. This card is also about our purpose in life, our calling, our life mission. So it could be like people are being called, and if it's a larger thing, I mean, this card is like activation, right? So you're being called to a particular issue, concern, experience. Yeah. Meaning like there's something that you're being called to do about the situation, right? And everybody's calling is different. We're not all going to be called to react and respond to the same experience in the same way. But it's about you taking a look at your particular calling, purpose, and life mission, right? So that is another aspect of the Judgment card that I love. And it being an angel card, so now let me talk about angels for a moment. The World card can also be about angels. This would be more about the angelic realm as a whole, or working with the four dominant archangels, and that would be Raphael, Michael, Gabriel, and Uriel. And then this card here is talking about the angel Gabriel. So there's something about communication, because for me, Gabriel is the chief communications angel, right? So there may be something about having to do with communication specifically, or a particular message, right? If you are a spiritual practitioner, then this would be about you looking at your purpose, your calling, your mission, and how you want to serve the world, right? People who are light workers or spiritual practitioners, you know, have a sense that they want to serve the greater good, or the collective, or the community in a larger way. So that could be about that. And then if that's the case, then it would be about you thinking about what is the message that you want to impart to others. And then being more business minded, right? This is about your career. What is the particular message? Because Gabriel can be the chief marketing angel, yeah, in a way. Like you have a message to share, but how are you sharing the message? You know, how are you getting that across? Who are the people that you are trying to reach, and are you reaching them effectively, right? Now, for some of us as spiritual practitioners, the Judgment card can be about a sense of persecution, right? So depending on your practice and what you practice and how you practice it, you know, in certain places in the world, there may be some level of persecution that's attached to that. And how do you rise above that? Now, as I'm talking about rising above it, I'm being reminded that the Judgment card, in maybe a more mundane sense, is about, you know, rising above preconceived labels, categories, boxes that the world wants to put us in, right? And then people get to choose to rise above that. In a more traditional image, the angel is blowing its horn, and people are rising up out of what appears to be coffins, right? And so they are rising up out of boxes, right? So it's about rising above, or rising out of the boxes that people are choosing to put us in, and maybe even self-imposed, how we put ourselves into certain types of boxes, and maybe about rising out of that kind of thing, right? And so the other thing about it is that, again, the Judgment card can be about a call to action. There's a rising up, and uprising with certain populations in the world to react and respond to something that is going on, right? And people tapping into their power. And so that, you know, as I'm talking about the power thing, is making me feel like choosing to look at the power that you have, and how are you using it, and rising up as a collective, meaning like there's power and strength in numbers, right? And doing that, and not allowing people to rob you of your power, right? So it's almost like a reclamation of power. That's what I'm seeing here with these two cards. Very powerful things because, again, they're both major arcana cards, so they carry more weight in a reading when they appear. But Judgment, again, is one of my favorite cards. And the reason why it's my favorite card, from a personal standpoint, it always makes me consider or stop and think about my purpose, my calling, my life mission, my reason for existence. Yeah, why am I here? What's the reason for my being here in this world at this time? It can also, in a negative sense, be like people experiencing existential angst or existential despair, or existential depression. I suffer from that when I'm in a place where I'm asking the big questions and I'm feeling like I'm not getting an answer. So it could be based on what's going on in the world. There are people who are experiencing that. And if you are one of those people, I feel you because I find myself in that place quite often. And I'm going to offer too that possibly if you're experiencing that, that could be a signal change that you are moving through a process of spiritual awakening. This would be an awakening card in that regard, yeah. That you are experiencing a spiritual awakening, and that is the first step into moving you into a new level of being or expression or consciousness, right? Again, the world would be a new level of consciousness based on this aspect of the card, the light at the top of the world, right? Right? So I'm seeing that, and you will move through it. It may take some time, but you will move through it, right? So that's what I want to offer about the Judgment card. Okay, so now let's move on to the heart of the matter. And here we have, okay, so here we have the two of spades. So now spades for me in playing cartomancy represents problems, challenges, difficulties, obstacles, and blocks, right? So we have a lower octave with the 2 because the Judgment card is 20, is a higher octave of 2, and here we have a lower octave. So this is more mundane. For me, I'm seeing this as challenges within relationships. The 2 is a relationship number. It can represent pairings, it could represent couples and coupling, it could represent partnerships, right? And that would be partnerships of all stripes, right? Not necessarily the romantic or the love-based type of relationships, right? But with the spade, it can represent difficulties or challenges within relationships, within partnerships, within couplings, right? To the point where it could be leading to some sort of division, separation, split, right? And that would be a nod to the visual space in between the two emblems here, right? And going with that, it could also be that people are experiencing differing thoughts, differing opinions, differing ideas, so there's a conflict between the way people are thinking, and that again would be what's going on in the larger world, right? Maybe not in your own world, your own sphere, your own bubble, but if you go beyond that, you are tapping into what's going on into collective, and maybe experiencing that with people who think differently from you, right? And that may be a challenge, right? But in a more complementary sense, the 2 of spades can also be about the sharing of ideas. The 2 is a number of sharing, of exchange, right? So there could be the sharing and exchanging of ideas. But if that's the case, then it's about how can we move beyond the experience of devolving into heated exchanges, debates, that kind of thing, where it could be how can we create the space to share ideas, especially those that differ from certain populations, certain groups, certain communities, in a way that kind of we can work on coming to some sense of middle ground or common ground kind of thing, right? So that would be the challenge because, as I talked about last week with a certain card, I can't remember the card, but it highlighted the idea of, oh no, it wasn't last week, it was the week before last, about polarity and duality and division, and how can we move beyond that, right? And then the judgment card would be saying too, like, that idea about division, separation, polarity, well, is going to keep happening, right? Life's exams, life's tests, right? It's going to keep happening until we as people look at it, meaning react and respond differently, right? We're going to keep re-experiencing this sense of separation, of otherness, of othering people, right? That kind of thing. And sometimes in personal relationships, meaning relationships that are not community-based, group-based, collective-based, right? But maybe more in your own personal experience. This card for me can be about sitting in silence, and maybe in some cases, in some experiences, situations, it may be in your best interest to keep your thoughts and ideas and opinions to yourself, right? So it could be maybe how could you exercise maybe a little bit more restraint when it comes to certain ways of thinking. Like, just because you have the thought doesn't mean you need to share it with everyone around you. Okay, so that may be something to think about with the two of spades, right? So I'm going to move on now to guidance or advice. Okay, so now here we have another spade card. So the way I read it, we have a progression here. We're moving from the two of spades to the three of spades, but we have a spade and a spade. So this can represent an ongoing challenge, an ongoing problem. And again, that may be more to the metaphorical or metaphysical lens that I looked at these two cards, right? Because these cards can represent resurrection, rebirth, something that's coming up again and again and again. So it could be like a new layer of a particular onion. That's a metaphorical phrase, meaning like we're getting into a deeper layer or experience of a situation, right? We're moving beyond the surface and going deeper. But this can represent an ongoing challenge or problem. In the quote unquote negative sense, in the positive sense, this could be about consciousness, right? If this is about ideas, ways of thinking, mindset, right? The spades, then it can also, in a more spiritual, metaphysical lens, be about consciousness. So then here we have increase, right? We're moving from the two to the three. So now the three of spades, I'm going to talk about it in two ways. The three of spades is a card that can represent the growth and development of a problem or a challenge. Yeah, it can also be needing to take a closer look at a situation. This is known as the X-ray card. So first and foremost, my disclaimer is that I'm not a medical practitioner or professional. So when I'm using the word X-ray, I'm using it more in the metaphorical or metaphysical lens, right? Even though that with the judgment card, this card can be about examinations. There may be people who are experiencing examinations, right? And there may be X-rays that are needed to be taken within that experience for a closer look and a better prognosis or diagnosis. I will go there. But when I'm talking about X-ray in this particular case, it's about taking a closer look at a situation, going beyond the surface, right? It could also be about you being willing to look at the situation from a more inner landscape or inner focus rather than an external focus, right? So there is that. Now, there could also be here, if we look at the visual of the pips, here we had two with the space in between, and now we have the same image, only there's a pip in between. So this could be about an idea, a thought, or opinion being expressed, and it's creating division, right? Meaning that there are two ways to look at this, or two ways to approach it, or two ways to consider that idea. It could also be about the interference of a third party, meaning like, okay, there is in a situation with two people and now another person has inserted themselves, but they're inserting themselves in a way that's making the problem more challenging than it needs to be. It's the best way I could put that, right? So that's one way of putting that. Now, in another lens, this is more personal, but I'm just going to put it out there. There is a science called cardology, and in that practice, the three of spades is my birth card. So I love the fact that this is the week that I'm experiencing my birthday, yeah? And I have my birth card show up. So now, the three of spades is known as the artist card. So it could be that people are expressing themselves, and I always say this from a spiritual perspective, that we are all creative beings from a spiritual perspective, and we are always creating based on the thoughts that we hold in our head and the words that we speak. And then the three is a number that represents creativity, right? It's about creative self-expression, right? So it could be about, people who are maybe feeling called, uh, maybe more in an artistic way, and that could be people who are actual artists to present their work to the world at large, right? And that could just be meaning making your work more visible, um, letting people have more access to it. And then the rub would be, if you're going to do that, be prepared for any judgments or criticisms that you're going to get about your work, right? And let's just kind of take the artist and the idea about visual work or creative work out of it. It could be about, no matter what you're doing, if you're going to choose to express your opinion out in the world, be prepared to face judgment and criticism, because not everybody's going to be in agreement with the way you see the world and what you have to say about the world, right? So be prepared for that. Not everybody, as a person, and this is just me, as a person who was a people pleaser for a long time and wanted everybody to like him, I had to learn the hard lesson, the cold reality, that not everybody's going to like you, right? So not everybody's going to like what you have to say or how you say it, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't have the right to say it, right? But just be prepared. The judgment card in that idea or in that experience is known as the consequences. There are always consequences to words and actions, right? And so you always have to be prepared for any possibility when it comes to the consequences, right? So the other thing that I want to say about the Three of Spades from my own personal experience as a birth card, it can be about indecision, right? So there may be some people who are going to be faced with some decision, right? But they're not going to be clear about it. It's going to be up in the air, or they're going to be indecisive about it, right? This card would suggest a split decision. I'm hearing an old Natalie Cole, who has since transitioned, song in my head called Split Decision, right? That would be the Two of Spades. And then the Three of Spades in that regard means like it may be an ongoing cycle of indecision about that, right? And it could be a repeating experience, because the Judgment card, again, is about something coming back up for you to re-experience, right? But it may involve a decision and not having clarity around the decision, because this card can sometimes represent indecision. Now, in a working sense, this is the card, one of the cards, that can represent, well, spades as overall can do this too, workaholism. So it could be a matter of, finding ways to take a break because you are always working, you are always doing, you're always on the go, that kind of thing. And you don't want to get to a point where life slows you down, so you can take a break. And so I will say, for me, the way that works is I will somehow develop a cold or some condition for 24 hours. And that's my body's way of saying, hey, dude, we need you to slow down so you can get some rest. And so sometimes that happens. But this card can be about, working too much. And also, too, in my particular case, this is a cool thing to note. Sometimes this card can be about working two jobs at the same time, which is what I do right now. And so for my birthday, since this is my birth card, for my birthday, I am taking the day off from both jobs. It is mandatory. I do that every year for my birthday, as a way of celebrating who I am. And that's a nice way. Let me say this with the Judgment card. This is about celebrating who you are, right? Even though I know this is my personal card, I'm just going to extend the message to those who it might resonate with, that give yourself permission and space, time and space, to celebrate who you are as a person, right? And I'm going to be doing that this week for my birthday, right? And only you will know the right and perfect way to do that, right? That's an individual thing. But this could be a nod for taking time to celebrate who you are, to come to some greater acceptance about who you are as a person, and not necessarily look to the world to validate you. Ooh, that's powerful. I'm going to have to remember I said that for myself. But again, this could be about, creativity, the artist, what is it that you have to say and how do you want to express that? This could also be about indecision, facing two options and not knowing which one to choose. And so just sit with that, and allow yourself the space to be in that space of doubt without faulting yourself, judging yourself, shaming yourself for not having it all figured out, right? You will get the answer in time. And then the last thing is about, working two jobs, working a lot. Maybe you, like me, you have two demanding jobs and that's why you work so much. But whatever the case may be, also to find some ways to give yourself a break, to give yourself time and space to allow yourself to rest, relax, and rejuvenate. Yeah? And then this card would be about rejuvenation. Okay, let me move on to the possible outcome card. Oh my goodness. So here we have another spades card. So here we have the ruling majority of spades. So let me remind you. So this suit can represent about problems, challenges, obstacles, blocks, in the challenging sense or the negative sense. In the positive sense, this could be about mind, mindset, and consciousness. And I love the ace of spades, and I love it coming after my birth card. So now the ace of spades is a card that can represent endings, completions, cycles. So it is a variation of the world card, maybe more in the playing card sense. It's a variation of the world card, but it also represents rebuilding or reconstructing your life. It is a card of transformation. And what I love about this particular design, I'm going to hold it up so you can really see. What I love about it is if you look, it has all the elements of all the suit emblems in the playing card deck. And at the heart of the spade, you see the club, and then surrounding the club, you see the diamond, and then surrounding the diamond, you see an inverted heart, and then that all coming back out comes to the spade, right? Isn't that an interesting design? So it represents like the integration of all the suits, right? And so clubs represents your working life, your business life. It also represents your public life, your social life. And then encased in that is the diamonds. What is the worth and value of all of that to you, right? The diamonds can represent our material existence, our material concerns, that being career and money, but it's also about energy, right? And then going back to the clubs, it could be about putting in the energy about who you are as a person, right? What is your public image, your social image, your self-image, yeah? And then the hearts. The heart's about our feelings, our emotions, our ability to relate to other people, but it's inverted, yeah? So it could be like, taking an inner look, a deeper look at that, at those relationships, or our feelings, our emotions regarding experiences, yeah? And then it leads to the spade, and the spade would be the consciousness that's developed when we do the inner work. Oh my gosh. And I just had that revelation come to me just at this moment. I never looked at it that way until now. So that I have to remember that that's quite powerful. But the ace of spades, like I was saying, is this is a card of transformation. So it could be about, how are certain experiences that you're looking at, whether it's something you're going through alone and by yourself, or something that is going on externally, and we are all a part of the collective experience, right? How are you allowing that to transform who you are? Maybe transform your thinking, because if you transform your thinking, then you transform your being, yeah? So there is that. But for me, this card is also known as the Order of Magi. And so this card can be about mystical and esoteric wisdom, and I love it coming after my own personal card. The way I'm looking at that is for me to explore more of that for my own personal sake, like I'm being called back to that. And also too, for spiritual practitioners in particular, and more magical practitioners, right? That would be part of the world, right? Maybe people going back into or delving back into their magical or spiritual practices, right? With the idea here too, like doing it with the sense of maybe more secrecy, because this card can represent secrets. It can also represent secret societies, right? So maybe going back underground based on what's going on in the world and how people might persecute you for your particular forms of practice, right? So now I will say one of the things that I love about playing cards is that they are easier to work with out in public spaces than a tarot deck, right? This would be about hiding what you do in plain sight, because most people wouldn't look at the use of playing cards for readings as they would tarot cards, right? So it's about like, what can you do with your practice? How can you keep it hidden in plain sight, right? So there is that. But it could be, you exploring that, transforming that, reworking that in a new way. One of the things that I love, and I opened with this, so I'll close with this, as a person of color, I realized that my forebears, my ancestors, those that came before me, used playing cards in their spiritual practice because they didn't have access to tarot cards, right? Tarot cards back in the day were more of a luxury item, yeah? So people did what they did with what they had access to and means to, and that was the playing card deck, right? So I will say that as a person of color and a person as a magical practitioner, in both those cases, this fits. So that was another reason why I came back to the art and practice of cartomancy, or working with the playing cards, because I felt like my ancestors, those that came before me, used it, and I wanted to honor that, right? And that would be another way of resurrecting something. So I'm resurrecting this as a practice for myself. So I'm offering that to other spiritual practitioners, and especially in this day and age with things changing the way they are, it may be a matter of how can you practice what you practice without drawing a whole lot of attention to it. And that's not to say that we're doing it from a place of fear, right? But we're doing it in a place of just being mindful of the changing times and the changing ideas and the division and the polarity that's going on in the world around us, right? So I'm going to end it there on that note. So if you made it to this part of the video with me, thank you so much for giving me the gift of your time. I do appreciate it. As I always say, I know in this day and age there's lots of things that you can do with your time. So if you have given me the gift of your time by watching this video to this point, I do so greatly appreciate it, and I appreciate you for tuning in. And on that note, James Himm Mitchell signing out. Thank you so much, and I will look forward to seeing you in this space for our next Oracle Outlook video reading. And until then, I'm hoping that you're having a great day, and I hope that you're going to have a great week. Take care.